So before we get started today, I wanted to show you the newest drop on the Sleeves Chief website. It's the Unchained Border Sleeves, and with Unchained really being on the rise right now, if you're playing the deck and you want to be in style, make sure to get those border sleeves. I think they look really good. And also, while you're at it, you can snatch up a couple packets of their over sleeves, which are just so good. I use them for some of my decks, and I would say they are some of the coolest and most quality over sleeves on the market right now. They're just really nice. They don't stick. They feel really good, and they are getting restocked, and all of that is happening at 8 p.m. Central European Time today on their website, which you can visit through my affiliate link in the description box below. And of course, don't forget to use my code SHADOW for 5% off your entire order. So 8 p.m. Central European Time today, restocks, new oversleeves, and use my code so you get a discount. And for today's video, we're going to be talking about how to beat branded Chimera. The deck is sort of like, it's everywhere, and it's not just branded Chimera. When Chimera came out, it really proved itself to be a useful engine in many different decks. You can play Chimera with branded, obviously. You can play with Kashira, with Runic, and there's just so many different variants. But I feel like the people are going to switch to the branded version with a very small package of branded. So that's usually going to be 2 Albas and 3 branded fusion, just because you can fit a ton of non-engine in that deck. And that's mostly what we're going to be focusing on today. So if you have any of your own thoughts, make sure to share them in the comments down below. If you have been maybe testing the deck and just know the ins and outs of it, I think that's going to be very useful for people. Like the video if you liked it as well. Make sure that you are subbed, and also ding the bell so you're notified when I post. And getting right into it, it's kind of weird because you have to focus on 2 different things. There's the branded side of things and Chimera. And it also depends on what version of the deck you're up against, because some people play it with a very big branded package with Arluber and opening. And there are even versions which is like almost the branded deck with a small Chimera package. There's literally Lobelion, Lost, branded in red, you know, obviously Kit and branded in white and all of that. Your interruptions are always going to vary because it depends on what your opponent is playing. And in games 2 and 3, you're going to it's going to be easier because you'll see a lot of their cards and what they are running. So the first card we're going to be focusing on is Ash, and it is probably one of the best cards against the deck. Arguably, there's another one that's a little bit better even, but we'll talk about it a little later. So with Ash, the best point of interaction would be on the Sword Knight. It just starts off the, I guess, full combo, you could say, when they rip a card, they set up disruption in the graveyard, and just being able to go from Sword Knight to the Searcher, which gets you Chimera Fusion and a monster, is kind of busted. It is literally a search for 2 cards, and that's always insane. So Ash on the Sword Knight would be the best, but why I said it's weird is because sometimes you want to Ash brand the fusion, especially if you don't know what you're up against. So if they start off with brand the fusion, it's just a tiny bit sus, because usually they will go for, like, if it's a regular branded deck, for opening or Aluber or Quem, Cartesia, fusion deployment, some of these cards which sort of make it easier for you to play through impermanence and stuff like that. So if they start off immediately with branded fusion, it's kind of weird because it's like they're probably trying to bait you, so you ash the branded fusion and then they get their entire Chimera package. Because what branded fusion actually gets you is pretty much Mirror Jade, and if you expect, depending on your hand, that you're going to be able to deal with 1 Mirror Jade, I would suggest ashing the Sword Knight 100%, because they are going to rip your card regardless. So if you ash brand the fusion and they go for Sword Knight, they're ripping an additional card, and then a lot of the builds play talents as well, and then they can rip a 3rd card. So you literally play with 3 cards when you start your turn, and that's kind of lame. So I would ash the Sword Knight 100%. And yeah, I said there's a card that's really busted against them. It's Shifter. Like, it's just, this deck kind of dies to Shifter. It is really hard to play if you don't have any resources in the graveyard. Your stuff that's Disruption in the grave, which is the Cornfield, and the Sword Knight will have to banish itself. So, like, everything is centered around the graveyard for the most part, and it's just kind of horrible if all of your stuff gets banished. It lasts for 2 turns. It is really hard to go up against it, so there's that. Another card, which again is going to depend on the build, is going to be Droll. And it depends because some people still play the Patchwork package with Polymerization and Edgem Chain, which I personally don't think is the greatest call right now because many people play Droll. They even main deck it for the most part, and it just loses hard to Droll anyway because you need to search a ton. So if you have Droll, you want to drop it as soon as possible. It is also going to sort of depend how good your opponent is. So it depends how prepared they are. But if they're playing a version which literally has a ton of searches, monsters, which would be the Patchwork Engine, even Aluber and stuff like that, then they lose to Joel even more. So Joel is always going to be nice. Just make sure to use it as soon as possible. Another card is Belle. And Belle is not amazing, but I wanted to talk about it because some people cite it, or a lot of people cite it actually, because of Labyrinth. And there's also stuff like Mathmag, Branded, many different decks. But since they play it, you kind of need to know when to disrupt Chimera Branded with it as well. And if you would use it, it would best be used on Chimera Fusion when it wants to add itself back to the graveyard. But like for the most part, I probably just wouldn't recommend Belle for this matchup unless they play a very big Branded package. And it's just going to depend on the build once more. So Belle is of course going to be nice against Branded in red and all these types of cards, but it depends what your opponent is on. So that's something to keep in mind. And another card is going to be Nibiru. And I also wanted to mention that it's just sort of going to be weird and again very much dependent because if they go for the Sword Knight like line, it's just going to not play into Nibiru. Usually they'll do it in like 4 summons and you won't do much with it. But if they go for Kit and a lot of different like Branded plays, then 100% they're playing into Nibiru. So I guess if you main deck it, that's something to keep in mind. And if you side deck it, you're going to see after the first game which version you're up against, and then you can sort of like side accordingly. And when it comes to negation effects, I would use it on the big winged level 5 monster which searches 2 things. Like I mentioned before, being able to get to 2 cards is kind of busted. So I would use like Impermanence, Veiler, anything and all that you can on that card specifically. Also because Swords Knight actually tributes itself for cost, so you won't even be able to use some negation effects on it, and if you do, you kind of misplayed. So don't use it on the Mirror Sword Knight. Use it on the Baphomet 100%. And yeah, we're gonna go through some going first and going second cards as well. Going first, the MVP is the Barrier 100,000%. It's just so nice right now. And of course, since you cited anyway for matchups like Pearly or like regular Branded, you can just use it against this matchup as well. And it's going to be so good. Just calling Fusion, turning off their board or their turn is kind of invaluable. And another going first card which is kind of decent as well is Anti-Spell, but since that one is used in games 2 or 3, they might have outs like Cosmic Cyclone or something like that if they expect it. So I would still probably cite it because for the most part their spell cards are really busted, and since the Chimera Fusion has to be used in the main phase, it doesn't even matter that it's a quick play spell card. It's still not going to be able to be chained if you standby phase Anti-Spell. And when it comes to some going second cards, which would be like spell cards and blowout cards, the first couple of ones are going to be Kaijus and Lava Golem. I don't think it's bad at all. Like usually these decks will have like an additional play. If you look at Branded, they still have a set Branded in red and they can, you know, throw an additional monster on the board. And with this deck, you have Chimera Fusion as well. But it's really cool because with the Kaiju, you're actually removing their king, which would have to be on the field for them to use their graveyard interruptions. So you kind of force them to, if they're able to fusion summon into another king, so their stuff is live. So you kind of dodge the Guardian Chimera, which is not bad at all. And Lava Golem is pretty much the same. They can put up 2 monsters easily, so it's going to be useful. Ras Fear Mode, I don't know how many times they will actually put up 3 cards. They might, so that's not bad either. But like Lava Golem and Ras Fear Mode are only like, I guess, limited to some specific decks, so they aren't as versatile as Kaijus. But all of that actually goes for book cards as well. Like if you book their interruptions, it's going to be very cool because like if it's booked, obviously it doesn't have a name, so the interruptions in the graveyard cannot be used. And you force them, if they can fusion summon, to go into another one so they turn on their stuff. So yeah, book cards are nice as well. And Evenly Matched is another one that's going to sort of like depend on how many stuff they commit. Because if they have like interruptions in the graveyard, they can just leave the fusion up and they use the interruptions. But yeah, it's sort of going to force them to get rid of a lot of their cards, which is not amazing for them. But you need to keep in mind that they might have hand chips in the hand as well for additional disruptions. So yeah, that's why I also think that this deck is just going to be the go-to version because you have many different interruptions in many different places, and that's always useful. So yeah, that kind of goes for your interruptions as the opponent as well, because you need to decide if you want to play spell trap removal or blowout cards for just, I guess, the monster part of the field. Because when you're siding, you just kind of don't want to go crazy and risk bricking and side out a lot of engine. And yeah, if you do side in back row removal, I guess it's not bad because you make sure to get rid of the Chimera fusion in your draw or standby phase with quick play spell cards so they can't use it, or you get rid of some other stuff that they might set with, which would be like along the lines of book cards or impermanence. So yeah, I think I am kind of for back row removal, but I wouldn't suggest siding a ton of cards so you don't take away from your consistency. And I mentioned just dealing with the field of monsters specifically. You can use cards like Rageki, Dark Hole, Lightning Storm, all of that to get rid of monsters as well. And it's going to be very similar to what I mentioned before. They will have to sort of like have cards in their hand to fuse, because the second you get rid of their stuff from the field, you almost make it impossible for them to go for Guardian Chimera, since we need to use stuff from the field as well. So it just really depends on what they have in their hand to be able to fuse with Chimera Fusion and put at least one more fusion on the board to have some kind of monster presence. And that's pretty much going to be it. There might be some other cards that are useful against this particular deck, but I wanted to focus on the ones that are seeing most play right now, which would be some of the most popular hand traps and going first and second cards. So if you like this video and you feel like you learned something, make sure to like it. It lets me know that you like me doing these types of videos of how to counter specific decks. And if you have any of your own thoughts, make sure to leave them in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.